facing the anger for defying an ancient tradition. They entered one of India's holiest Hindu temples, where women aged between 10 and 50 are not allowed. Hundreds of thousands are now united in a fight for their right. Can they succeed against the religious conservatives? This is Inside Story. Hello there and welcome to the programme. I'm Laura Kyle. The Indian southern state of Kerala is at a standstill following violent protests after women entered one of Hinduism's holiest shrines for the first time. A ban on women getting access to the temple was lifted by the country's top court, but conservative groups objected. Katia Lopez-Hodayan has more.
From the temple to the streets, outrage over the breaking of what was considered by some an ancient religious ban on women. Hundreds of conservative Hindu protesters marched on the streets of Kochi in the southern Indian state of Kerala, calling for most women to stay out of the Sabarimala temple, which draws millions of worshippers every year. On Wednesday, 2 women, under the cover of darkness and with a police escort, breached the ban. The temple had refused to allow women of menstruating age to enter, saying it was a centuries-old tradition. But in September, India's Supreme Court overturned the ban. Despite that ruling, opponents continue to deny women between the ages of 10 and 50 access. That is, until this week, when 2 women made history by finding a way in.
It's the government's responsibility to protect women. The government has fulfilled this constitutional responsibility. Right-wing volunteer organizations are trying to turn the temple into a clash zone.
Conservative Hindu groups immediately called for protests, leading to empty streets and closed shops in Kerala and neighboring states. Some bus services were halted and taxis stopped operating. The temple ban issue has become increasingly controversial in the run-up to India's general election scheduled for May.
There will be protests against this. That is quite natural. That means that action taken by government goes against existing customs. So those who believe in tradition and are in favor of it may have opposing views to the government.
Hundreds of thousands of women from across the state formed a 620-kilometer human chain on Tuesday and called it the Women's Wall. It's all part of a religious fight, now turned political. For Inside Story, Katia Lopez-Hodayan, Al Jazeera.
Let's bring in our panel now, and joining us from the capital of Kerala in southern India via Skype is Rahul Easwar, president of the Ayappa religious army, which is leading the movement against the entry of women into this temple. From Chicago, also via Skype, Madhavi Menon, director of the Centre for Studies in Gender and Sexuality in India. And from New Delhi, we have Rushta Siddiqui, executive committee member of the National Federation of Indian Women. A very warm welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us. Rushta, if I could start with you, I'm trying to get an idea as to why these 2 women wanted to enter this temple when they knew it would cause such an uproar, and indeed they were able to worship at thousands of others of Ayappa temples.
It's actually something which is their constitutional right. What they are saying is, if they are devotees and if they have the right to enter a temple, there is no reason why they shouldn't be entering it. If it is just a question of them and God. If this is the form of worship, they have the freedom to worship it. It's India, it's a democracy. We have constitutional rights and we have constitutional guarantees. No moral police can stop them. And that's what these women were trying to prove. That's what the whole wall was trying to prove.
So for these women then, Rushta, was it a religious protest or was it a protest about women's rights?
You want to see it as a protest for women's rights, but it's more a protest, it's more a gesture for gender justice and social equality.
Rahul, you're in Kerala. Just explain to us what's happening outside right now.
I'm very sorry for the lack of connectivity and the inconvenience here. People have gathered outside. It's a riot kind of a situation. We are in the middle of a protest. That's the reason why this inconvenience happened. Even right now, thousands of people are out in Trivandrum, the capital city of Kerala, and there is a huge protest going on in different places. Many of our people were arrested. That's the reason why I got late. We were stuck up in the police station. We are trying to get our people out. There is heavy protest happening. It is almost like a street war. And the protests have also spread to villages. Many people have been arrested. More than 350 people have been arrested and detained. I apologize for the inconvenience caused to you, but it is a heavy kind of a riot kind of a situation here. People are very agitated regarding Sabarimala and the breakage of belief that happened. Many women are also outside. They are also agitating. I was a part of them. That's the reason why I came in and I had this. Thank you for having me. Sabarimala is a very sensitive thing for us. Almost 12 states in India have witnessed protest. Almost 6 nations in the world have witnessed protest. Lakhs of women have come out on the road. We feel cheated by the Kerala government because in the middle of the night, they could sneak in some ultra-left activists and demean the faith. It's a faith where Hindus, Muslims and Christians stand together to protect Sabarimala. All the major parties of India are supporting us. None less than the Prime Minister of India, Sri Narendra Modi, is supporting us. So we are hopeful. We will have a fight for this. This is Jallikattu version 2 for Kerala. There is heavy situation. Outside, people have gathered outside, may turn violent.
Rushta, you can hear Rahul there talking about the level of anger against these 2 women who entered the temple. I mean, there's no doubt, is there, that it has caused a huge uproar and it's a hugely divisive issue.
What we are overlooking, and what the media and even you are overlooking, is the fact that you're looking at a little mob which is trying to become violent. It's trying to take law in its own hands. You have the gentleman saying that we are supported, it's an emotional outburst, we are supported by the Prime Minister and everyone. Nobody is taking into consideration the emotions of over 50 lakh women who came out on the streets claiming their right, their constitutional and fundamental human right. You're looking at a protest, you're looking at violence. And violence is being caused by a mob.
Madhavi, what's your take on this? Has it caused widespread global protests, or is it just simply a little mob that is sparking a lot of violence?
Although it seems clear that this is a vocal and violent mob, and violence, unfortunately, is an old, tried and tested game that gets everyone's attention, including the medias these days. But I just want to say, in response to the earlier part of your question, and in response to the introduction to this program, when you said that this is the violation of an ancient tradition, I'd like to dispute that, because there is no ancient tradition unless you're terming sheer misogyny an ancient tradition, which of course it is. There is no ancient tradition prohibiting women of menstruating age entering Sabarimala. Depending on who you ask, this is about 40 years old, 60 years old, 25 years old. But of course, what remains ancient is a certain belief that women are inferior to men, and that they are dirty and therefore should not be allowed into sacred places or serious places, which is why, whether it's a government or it's a temple, women are seen to be lesser than the men who are occupants of those spaces.
But it is no doubt, as I go back to the original point, it's a hugely divisive issue, and it's not black and white, is it? Because it's not simply women versus men here. I mean, we've got plenty of women also coming out onto the streets against women entering this temple.
Well, just because women are patriarchal creatures themselves doesn't mean that this is not a clear-cut issue. I mean, patriarchy only survives because it is able to recruit both men and women to its cause. This is an issue about what we consider pure and impure. And unfortunately, especially within a rigid Hindu structure, certain castes and certain genders and certain practices are always relegated to the impure part of the ledger. And so it is fairly clear-cut in that sense. Just because some men are opposed to this and some women support it, doesn't mean that it is an unclear gender war. It is a gender war, but it's a gender war that is fought across the lines of gender.
Unfortunately, we've lost Rahul. The line to Kerala was too bad and we couldn't reconnect with him, but we'll push on with the discussion anyway. And Rushta, most Hindu temples, they ban women, don't they, who are on their period from entering Should women be regarded as unclean when they're menstruating? I mean, if we look at the bigger issue here, this is what Madhavi was saying, that we've got this idea of pure versus impure.
Should they be not allowed? That is just not the question, because they have their fundamental human right. They are equal, they are citizens. And even in Hindu temples, the practice is that during the 1 week of menstruation, you don't enter. That's something you do out of choice. It cannot be imposed on you. It's something which is, othering you as a gender. It is othering you as a caste. And that is just not permitted. But that is what the Supreme Court has upheld. That is what all the activists and the state government are trying to uphold.
But while you have so many people praising the Supreme Court ruling for ensuring women's rights to worship, you've also got a lot of people criticising it for dictating so-called correct religious practices.
It's a right-wing ideology that you're looking at. So if it's a right-wing ideology, it is going to look at emotions and giving that priority over logic, law, justice, and equality, which is where the whole problem is. What you're seeing as a huge problem is just this. When you're prioritizing the emotions, the sentiments, and something which a whole range of fundamentalists are scared of, losing their hold on women, losing their hold on patriarchal feudal practices, losing their hold on power, that is what you're looking at, which is not right, is the mildest way of putting it.
OK. Madhavi, but when you look at this, I mean, it is a hugely emotional issue. I mean, we've just heard from Rahul about people agitating outside the office where he was down in Kerala. There has been violence, and you have got the ruling BJP party getting involved and calling for more protests. I mean, is this really something that can be changed in India?
What is this that can be changed?
The idea that women can enter temples, that where there has been a ban, or indeed that menstruating women can enter temples.
Of course it can. I mean, if we believed that it couldn't, then our lives would be fairly bleak, wouldn't it? I just want to say the BJP is not the ruling party in Kerala. It is the ruling party at the center of the country. And certainly it has been playing a primary role in fomenting the kind of violence in Kerala. Luckily for all of us, it's the communists in power in Kerala. And they have said unequivocally and repeatedly that they are going to abide by the Supreme Court ruling, because the Supreme Court ruling recognizes very clearly that the practice that's been going on in Sabarimala is completely not only illegal, but inhumane. And in fact, most temples in India do not specify that menstruating women cannot enter the temple. But Rushta is completely right that many women self-censor and have done so for centuries and will not go to a temple. I can think of nothing sadder than that women don't need to be policed any longer because we police ourselves and think of ourselves as dirty and inferior and refuse to go into a temple. The Supreme Court is really trying to bring us all up to speed, and especially in a temple like Sabarimala, which is one of the most open, egalitarian and accepting of temples in India, for this to be an issue is absolutely absurd.
It does seem extraordinary, doesn't it? Because it does attract worshippers from all different denominations. It's got Muslims, Christians, and as well as Hindus coming, and all castes. And the only thing that it does stipulate is that women shouldn't enter. And one wonders why. Where has that actually come from?
Well, again, this is, a question that will elicit different answers that different people you ask. Because legally, this was only in the 70s that the High Court says, women of menstruating age defy an age-old belief. But where is this age-old belief? Where has it come from? Where is it written down? Who has said so? And of course, as with all legal cases, the question has to be who stands to benefit from such a ruling or such an ancient belief or such an age-old tradition. And it's very clearly two classes of people who stand to benefit: men and upper caste Hindus. And I'm afraid the law cannot say we will just go along with men and upper caste Hindus and allow these traditions to stand, because we cannot have such majoritarian tyranny in this country, which has been teetering on the precipice of exactly this kind of tyranny for a few years now.
Rushta, many of the protesters will say that women who are cosmopolitan, they live in the biggest cities, they're elite, they are going against what traditional conservative women in more rural communities want. Would you agree with that?
Look, all the elite conservative women that you're talking about, if they believe in something, they have a right to believe in it, but they need to keep it to themselves. They have no authority to enforce it on a larger social scale. Taking law into your own hands, creating a moral police, creating a force which is armed, violent, stopping women, that is just not done. That's illegal, that's unconstitutional. It may have the blessings of any right-wing political party you like, but it is against the rule of law. It is not just unconstitutional, it's inhuman. It's a violation of human rights. Yes, as the speaker said earlier, that patriarchy would not have existed if it had not been for certain conforming women. A certain section of them conform. Fine. You want to conform, conform. You want to believe in a certain superstition, tradition, keep it to yourself. Don't enforce it onto a larger public. That's not done.
OK. How much does it concern you then, Rushta, that the government, the ruling BJP party, which of course is a Hindu nationalist party, has now jumped onto the bandwagon, is encouraging these protests, has set itself on a collision course with the state Kerala government? I mean, is that going to be pushing more of these protests, more of this violence?
It is going to promote the violence in other forms and in many other states, but there is a very, very likely chance that the awareness about the issue and the awareness about their aim to just get power at any expense is what is going to get exposed through this entire drama that they are trying to create. It's very simple. If you try to suppress someone and show them as being, not equal, and then you're trying to use them as a stepping stone. Today it's women, tomorrow it could be somebody else, and tomorrow it could be you. That's something which is going to register. That's going to be something which is going to resist. The point is the violence and the mindset is already spreading. It's gotten into a game online. It's gotten into a whole lot of other temples and a whole lot of other institutions. It's something very unhealthy and it needs to be nipped right now.
Madhavi, do you think it will be, or can it be stopped right now, or is it only going to get worse as the general elections grow closer in April and May this year?
Well, there is no doubt that there is a political will to violence at the center, and with all the RSS-backed protesters, Rahul Easwaran's outfit also is called an army, which I think is a very telling title. We must remember, though, that in the local municipal elections held in Pamba and the areas around Sabarimala recently, the communist government not only won all the seats that it had, but in fact increased the number of seats they won. And the BJP's share dwindled drastically. It was already small, but it went down almost to zero. So people aren't fools. And Rushta's absolutely right. We are well aware of what's going on, which is a grab for power at all costs. It is a will to violence at all costs, and completely disregards, forget human rights, forget women, completely disregards the rule of law. So the central government is setting itself on a collision course, not only with the state government and all the people in the state, but with the Supreme Court of India. And that is a very, very dangerous situation.
The Supreme Court's going to be looking at this issue again at the end of January. Are you confident that it's going to stand by its ruling?
Well, it has already stood by its ruling earlier, and I think it will stand by its ruling again. I think it was absolutely brilliant of the Supreme Court to say we will only hear the review petitions on January 23rd, which is what they're going to do, because I think they're hoping by that time several women of menstruating age would have entered the temple, and therefore the entire sort of madness surrounding the issue would have been dialed down. And I certainly hope that that is the case, that people begin to accept that, in fact, now this has happened, let's carry on because this is the more egalitarian way of being in the world.
Rushta, do you share that view? Do you think more women of menstruating age will be entering this temple?
Whether they will be entering the temple or not is optional. The point is the awareness about their rights is something which is spreading very fast. And yes, she's very right. It is something the Supreme Court has understood this point that it's not something, it's something very arbitrary. It's unjust, it's unfair, it's inhuman. And they very clearly stated it in their verdict. They're going to stand by it. And most importantly, the women are going to understand what's happening. The people are going to understand what's happening, and Kerala is not a state you can dismiss. The awareness levels, especially the political awareness levels, are very high. It's not going to be a cakewalk. If they won in the municipal elections, they're going to be winning again. And if discrimination and, you are trying to break a society based on gender, caste, religion, it is going to succeed only so far and not further.
Okay, but Rushta, you really do need more
in.
pioneering, brave women like these two, don't you, to be entering the temple before more women feel confident enough to follow suit. I mean, you're not going to suddenly see everybody now feeling that they can enter the temple, especially when they're seeing the protest that it's caused thus far.
Look, the women are not entering not because they don't want to enter or because they're just scared of the kind of violence which the mob rule is, spreading around the area. There is moral police force guarding the gates.
Okay.
They're defying the police, they're defying the law.
Madhavi, do these two particular women, do they fear for their lives at this point in time? And we know that video is circulating on WhatsApp, and we know also how very quickly this platform can whip up a mob. But what's the state for these two women?
I mean, not only are they under police protection, but their families too have been taken off to undisclosed locations. That's the extent of the fear that this mob is whipping up in Kerala. It is just shocking to me that these are the people who are getting any kind of attention, because they should be, if you cut them loose, if you cut all these armies of men and patriarchal women loose and just ignore them, hopefully things will get better. But right now we're living in such a ridiculous moment that people who are on the side of equality, egalitarianism, liberty, the maximum opportunities for the maximum number of people, we are the ones in fear, living in fear of our lives. I mean, surely there's something wrong with this picture. And those people who want to shut down, who want to erect barriers, who want to build walls around everything and everybody, those are the people running riot on the streets, running amok and defying everybody.
There we have to leave our discussion today. Many thanks to both of you, Madhavi Menon and Rushta Siddiqui, and thanks to Rahul Easwar, who was joining us earlier. Also, thanks to you for watching. You can see the programme again anytime by visiting our website, that's aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, do go to our Facebook page, that's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Laura Kyle, and the whole team here, it's bye for now.